Hello everyone, you're listening to the Kaijusaurus Podcast. What you are in fact listening to is our third attempt at an opening, because our first opening, which we recorded about 2 minutes ago, we tried to record something of a funny back and forth, a bit of a bit. Didn't quite work out.
Then we tried to do it again or explain ourselves, and that wasn't even.
Yep, the second one
that was a mess.
The second one we tried to make completely natural, and it fell apart.
Yeah. So third time's a charm.
Yes, here we are. So
let's just dive in. Let's just do straight face.
All enthusiasm is gone.
Yeah, let's try and do just as serious a podcast as we can for what is undoubtedly the most serious Godzilla film so far.
I mean, you're not wrong. The last few episodes we have had a little bit of levity, but
yeah, you know what? Enough jokes, enough
no place
farce,
here.
Enough references to things that aren't important. I think we just need to talk about the films.
I agree.
Keep them straight.
With that in mind, this is the Kaijusaurus Podcast, the podcast in which myself, Steven Sloss, a lifelong fan of Godzilla films, watches and reviews all 30 films in the Godzilla canon with my good friend, Roz Menzies, who's also here.
Hello.
This month, date or year, depending when you're listening to this, we are watching... No, we're not watching, we have watched, and are now reviewing 1969's
All Monsters Attack.
A.K.A. Godzilla's Revenge.
A.K.A.
Gojira, Minilla, Gabara, Oro, Kaiju, Daishingeki. That was probably a terrible pronunciation, but
Yeah, no,
we'll
that's
roll
alright.
with it. And of course, we were just joking about this.
Yeah, don't worry.
We had you.
Yeah, we got you. You're in, Let's just jump right into it. Let's run through the facts. So, who's directing it? Who's on the crew?
Ishiro Honda's directing, as he did with the last one, Destroy All Monsters. Tomoyuki Tanaka is producing. Music by Kunio Miyoshi.
Newcomer, fresh-faced.
Special effects were credited to Eiji Tsuburaya, but that was more of an honorary credit because he was technically still the head of the special effects department. He died a month after the film was released. Whereas the special effects were actually handled by Ishiro Honda, with assistance from one of Tsuburaya's proteges, Teruyoshi Nakano.
Okay, that's good.
Who has a future in this film as well.
Because we talked about in the last podcast, we talked about Eiji Tsuburaya, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
So you mentioned that he passed away sort of by
the last
film.
The last few films, most of his credits were just honorary and out of respect, even though he didn't really commit hands-on work to these films.
Yeah.
All Monsters Attack / Godzilla's Revenge. I said to you in the last episode, Ross, that this is going to be quite like the switch of pace from Destroy All Monsters, and this, it really is one of the finest examples of tonal whiplash in a franchise.
Absolutely. What I was going to say, or just carry on, is that so this is the 10th film, and this is the first film after what we were saying last time was essentially going to be a finale.
Yes, indeed.
The last movie, Destroy All Monsters. So I was just going to ask very briefly, do you know kind of how this film was made, or under what circumstances we started making Godzilla films again after this?
Destroy All Monsters was a big success.
So
it became financially viable to make another Godzilla film, and it made fiscal sense.
And when was Destroy All Monsters made?
1968.
Okay, so there was no hiatus at all. It was just the next year we made another one.
Okay, despite the success of Destroy All Monsters, it's still nowhere near the heyday of the franchise, say King Kong vs. Godzilla, in terms of audience attendance and box office figures. However, while Toho has to keep their costs down for this new Godzilla film, a rival franchise paves the way for how it should be done, or how it could be done.
Yeah.
Let's rewind back to 1965, when Toho's chief rival studio, Daiei, released a film called Gamera, the Giant Monster, about a giant fire-breathing, jet-propelled tortoise that lays waste to Tokyo. It was very much a conscious attempt for this studio to have their own Godzilla-like franchise, and it did indeed become that. Whereas the Godzilla series very gradually changed its tone, and by this point certainly was leaning more towards a sort of juvenile audience. The Gamera series rattled through that very quickly. The first film is a straight-laced monster movie, the second one is very melodramatic and adult, the third one makes it kiddie, and from then on it becomes very kiddie. 1968, Destroy All Monsters is released. Daiei releases their fourth Gamera film in 3 years.
Wow.
Gamera versus Virus, or Destroy All Planets. Yeah, the same US distributor released both of those films.
Wow, that's so funny.
Gamera vs. Virus makes extensive use of stock footage from previous films to tell its story, or more, in reality, to pad out its running time. Because Daiei's budgets were already impoverished, and they were being slashed even more. But they did get creative, to their credit, and I really like that film, and I like all the Gamera films anyway. So Tomoyuki Tanaka apparently the producer took a very keen interest in Gamera vs. Virus and approached screenwriter Shinichi Sekizawa, asking him if he could possibly write a film constructed around footage from previous films. And he said, yeah, I can do that, that's easy. It's already done practically. And so All Monsters Attack, or Godzilla's Revenge, was born.
Yeah, and here we are.
Here we are.
Right, okay. So, should we dive right in? Let's talk about it.
Interesting thing about this film. It probably takes place in the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Within this world, Godzilla and Minilla are fictional characters.
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about, actually.
Ichiro, our kid protagonist, he's 7 or 8 years old, I think he's meant to be. He's a kid who lives in a sort of dingy apartment building. His parents work around the clock.
He's bullied.
He's bullied, yeah. He's got a bully called Gabara. And his only friend, apparently, is...
the old toy maker.
Yeah, an old toy maker who lives next door. A kindly old inventor, played by AC Yamamoto. Very fine actor, Ross.
Yes, he was.
Fun fact about AC Yamamoto. In 1967, he played in a film called King Kong Escapes, in which he played a sort of Bondian villain. His character's name was Doctor Who.
That's funny.
H-U-U.
That's great. Doctor Who was out by that point, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was that deliberate?
For a good 4 years, Doctor Who was out by this point. I don't think it was deliberate, but I mean, it's funny.
It's funny though. It's now we can pretend it was deliberate.
But
well, I like that actor a lot. I like that character a lot. So
and ironically enough, AC Yamamoto would have made a very good Doctor in a Japanese version of Doctor Who. Anyway, Ichiro is a latchkey kid, as he's referred to. He sort of has to look after himself. He's left to eat meals by himself, just like clean up after himself, amuse himself. He doesn't really have a lot of friends, etc. His parents work around the clock. And
right now his sort of latest fascination is with Minilla. And
vacuum tubes.
Well, his two fascinations. First of all, he's fixated on the old abandoned factory, and he sort of expresses interest of going in there to explore at some point.
Indeed.
But generally he seems sort of fascinated and really interested in Minilla, the monster, and he imitates the roar, and he talks so much about Minilla. So that's really what's on his mind. He's got monsters on the mind.
Yeah. He's a stand-in for the fans.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I felt. So he goes home and he likes to sit and fantasize about being on Monster Island, and that's where he dreams of going.
It's his escape, essentially.
Yeah,
from his really humdrum existence, which he doesn't seem to ever let get him down, but he seems to be aware of it, whether he is aware that he's aware of it or not.
Yeah. So throughout the film we sort of take brief jumps into this magical world of Monster Island.
Yes, where Minilla is a friend of Ichiro, but Minilla is also facing his own Gabara in the form of a giant monster bully called Gabara, who's sort of a warty, toadish, pug-faced,
butt-faced
ogre.
Yeah, with no tail.
Yeah.
A weird like sagging butt.
It's like these guys that wear their jeans really low.
Yeah, no, totally.
And this, in real life, parallels Ichiro's confrontations with his bully. Meanwhile, there have been a pair of bank robbers who have stolen 50 million yen in bills and are on the run around Ichiro's neighbourhood, and it turns out they've taken refuge in the abandoned factory next door to Ichiro's apartment building.
Yes.
And through a series of unfortunate events, Ichiro becomes entangled with these undesirables and ultimately thwarts them.
Yes, exactly. Because he, just to rattle through the rest of the plot, he goes... in between his sort of little fantasy times, this all takes place in one night as well, doesn't it? While he's waiting for his parents to come home. So before dinner, if I recall, he goes to wander around the abandoned factory.
That's right, yeah.
And discovers one of the robbers' driving licenses.
Yeah.
And he just picks it up because it's cool, it's a driving license.
Yeah.
And then heads back to his apartment. The robbers obviously not wanting their identities to be discovered or their hiding places to be known, and essentially to make sure there's not a trail leading back to them, they head out and attempt to kidnap Ishiro.
Which they do.
Which they do indeed.
Take him back to the factory, hold him hostage. They tie him up not very well.
No, not very well. And throughout this sort of traumatic ordeal, Ishiro continues to return to the monster island of his imagination.
In his fantasy,
Yeah, where he continues to help Minilla best Gabara, essentially, and like learn his own powers and understand his own strength.
Exactly, yeah.
So essentially, by the time that Minilla is strong enough to defeat and fight and fend off Gabara, this is when Ishiro wakes up, manages to escape from the robbers and sort of fend his own and hold off against them, or at least long enough for the police to arrive.
Absolutely.
And then he saves the day.
He does.
And he becomes a famous little boy.
Right, so...
that was a very brisk summary.
It was quite brisk.
It is an hour and 10 minutes is a brisk film.
Well, that's true.
Which I love. I love a short film. 70 minutes is the perfect length for a film for me. Not really, obviously, but...
Before I ask you the question, did you enjoy this? And I know the answer. I think I know the answer.
You think you can guess? The listeners surely can. Just listen to any previous podcast and find out whether I enjoyed it or not.
Here's something to note. For many, many years, this was or has been regarded amongst the worst Godzilla films, like among the lowest of the low. Like we're talking bottom 3.
Yeah.
And I mean, all I can say at this stage, I'll get into it more, but I entirely disagree. I like it a lot, and so Ross, what do you think?
Okay, well, first of all, you telling me that makes a lot of sense, and I 100% understand why you would see this and go, that sucked. I really do get that, and I can see why if that is a very disappointing Godzilla movie in a lot of ways. Godzilla is very much a background character to it, and in fact does not appear. The real Godzilla appears only as a fictional version of
no monsters technically appear physically.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought this was a really interesting film, and I think the best way for me to frame it for you guys, or how I felt about it, is that coming off of Destroy All Monsters, where I learned last time that was essentially structured as a finale of sorts, or as an end to the franchise.
Then this comes along.
Yeah, to then essentially, for lack of a better term, reboot the franchise in terms of like, okay, actually, we're just going to keep making more.
Yeah.
I understand that, to me, that's actually a fitting place, right after a supposed finale, is a fitting place to put a film that's comprised a lot of stock footage.
Yeah.
If you're going to put one of those films somewhere, then sort of in that downtime between like a finale and sort of starting something new makes sense to me. I think, to be honest, I think the Monster Island sections for me are actually the least interesting part of that movie.
Yeah, especially the stock footage sequences.
So I think that proves to me why like so many people would find that a very disappointing movie, because it's a Godzilla movie, and the Godzilla sequences, first of all, are bizarre anyway, but they're not particularly
this is a bizarre film, no doubt about it.
To just start with the clip footage, because I feel like it's better to just start talking about that in general. It's even reusing the fight scenes of previous Godzilla movies, it just doesn't work. It comes off as strange to me because it lacks a context, essentially. Yes, they have Ishiro and Minilla peeking from the bushes as Godzilla fights the Ebra horror of the deep again.
And they try and incorporate it well. They try and like have them splashback of water, but it doesn't...
The continuity is there. They're watching it. I believe that, yes, in the corner they're hiding away in the bushes, but, you know, there was a context for that fight that had stakes, and so there's like less of an actual stake in a lot of these fights, So you're just hopping into watching Godzilla fighting off a monster.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
With no setup or context or...
Yeah.
But it's interesting, though, because, like, I'm not making the case that this was absolutely the intention of director Honda or screenwriter Sekizawa, but the way I've interpreted it the last few years is that Ichiro is reliving battles he's watched in films. Ichiro is a kid who went to go and see Eber Horror of the Deep. He went to go and see Son of Godzilla. And now in his fantasy, he's replaying the fights he saw.
Yeah,
and he's
like,
a spectator physically there with Minilla. Yeah.
Well, because early on in the film, he sort of lists through, or when he arrives first to Monster Island, there's a sort of, wow, who's who of each of his favourite...
Yeah, there's Anguirus, there's Gorosaurus.
Yeah, listing off his toys almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the toys he would want.
Wait, he does have a Godzilla toy in his cupboard at one point.
All right. No, there you go. Yeah, no, so I buy that idea. So coming off the clip show thing and going back to that point you made about Ishiro essentially being a kaiju fan.
Yeah.
I think, that's a good prism to watch that. That's a good... He is the fan. He comes from a world where, like us, these are movies and he really loves them.
I think, though, regarding this film's overly negative reputation, I mean, obviously you're allowed to dislike any film you dislike. Of course you are. But I think a lot of the dislike for this film is coming from the wrong audience. Because, I mean, kids have obviously adored and enjoyed Godzilla films before. This is the first Godzilla film that is clearly intended for, like, a juvenile audience. We're talking, like, target audience is 10 and under. If you're like a 35-year-old man living in the United States... and you're a hardcore Godzilla fan, doesn't matter. This film was not made for you.
Yeah, it was made for kids like 40 years ago.
You're not the intended audience for this film.
Yeah, I mean...
You and I are not the intended audience for this film. But, I mean, I really like this film. I think it's incredibly sweet. I think it's actually, I'll get into this more, but I think it's also an incredibly sad film.
No, certainly.
And I think... a lot of its negative reputation comes from that, is a misunderstanding. People seem to want to disassociate themselves from things that they think are childish. I mean, this film is childish, but not in a way that, it's immature. It is childish because it was produced for children. This film, Ross, was literally produced and debuted at something called Toho's Champion Festival, which was essentially like a sort of summer film festival for kids. They'd have it every year. It would feature things like re-releases of Disney films.
Okay.
Toho was Disney's Japanese distributor.
Right, I didn't know that.
Like, so they'd show like on like a day at the cinema for kids during the summer holidays.
Yeah.
They'd show like a re-release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a couple of blown-up episodes of Ultraman, animated shorts, and a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, great.
Like in any particular order, whatever. And this would go on through a lot of the summer. This and a lot of past Godzilla and Toho Kaiju films would be shown at the Champion Festival in sort of trimmed down hour-long versions.
Yeah.
Like to just move it along a bit, so
yeah.
kids would be more engaged. This film was specifically produced for that festival.
Yeah, and so that's why it's an hour and 10 minutes.
Exactly.
It's just
and
like a little bit shorter.
That's why it's for children.
That's the perfect
and,
length.
Like, we're 18 minutes into the podcast and I'm going on a rant already, but like,
Steven,
I'm sorry.
just admit you hate adults.
Well, I mean, I hate adults when they act like this towards this film that's not for them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I get that.
It's like...
I hear you.
I didn't even see this film first as a child. I remember, well, I say that. I think I maybe saw this film for the first time when I was 12. That is a child, actually.
That is a child.
But
that would get you a child fare on a train. That is a child.
But, I mean, I wasn't like a tiny kid then.
No.
But I've never disliked this film.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's a real shame that it's so despised in still a lot of circles of fandom, because I genuinely think this is leagues ahead of some things that are yet to come, in particular the mid-1990s. But we'll get there.
We will get there.
We'll certainly get there.
No, because as we go on, I think I'll be happy to sort of, once I've sort of talked about what I feel, I'll be quite happy to crap on the film like a little bit later on as well. Because I have plenty funny things to say. Because there's
it's a bloody flawed film.
Yeah, it really is. But like I actually, there's a lot that I liked about this film. And to start off, going back to what I've always said, and I do say this almost every podcast, I love the variety of the Godzilla franchise.
Yeah.
That, hey, last time we made a sort of who's who end of the franchise,
blowout,
no holds barred, everyone's back blowout kind of movie, like World at War movie, and now hey, we'll do a wee kids film.
Yeah, this
with
like,
the same
watching
sort of...
it in the context of I cut you off.
Oh yeah,
there.
no, that's fine.
Watching it in the context of this having just come off Destroy All Monsters a year later, like the opening of this film is so quiet. Like it's kids walking home.
Yeah, no,
he walks
exactly.
home to an empty flat.
Because I guess I'll just start from what my very initial thoughts were, and touching very briefly on you saying that in a way this is a very realistic film in terms of Godzilla not, or possibly not really existing.
Not literally existing, yeah.
I think it's important to understand or like approach the movie, at least for me, that what I like about it is that this movie's told from Ishiro's perspective, is that we see the world as Ishiro sees it, and his understanding of the world is how we sort of approach this. But even from the very beginning of the film, that comes across by just the realness of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think as an opening goes, and as an establishing of who this character is and where he lives and the world that he lives in, I think this is one of the best establishing openings of a Godzilla film so far, and just showing us who Ishiro is, and not less so about his character, but more about
his situation.
Yeah. He lives in a very industrial area of, I assume, Tokyo?
Yeah, or at least a large city.
Yeah, very industrial area of his city. Working class family, parents are both working constantly. It's his world is back roads.
Yeah.
A freeway goes right through his town. Railway line, industrial railway lines, not commercial railway lines.
And
commercial.
like smog-laden factories everywhere. Smog-laden factories, the shape of things to come. Mm-hmm. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
The listeners will understand that.
I don't get it. Totally industrial area. And beyond that, a rundown industrial area.
Exactly.
There's the abandoned factories and in that rubble and old machinery and...
Yeah. I mean, this film has a lot more going on in it than the kind of people that I've mentioned before give it credit for. Because, I mean, all the clues you've listed off there, like he lives in what is clearly a sort of rundown neighbourhood. There's an abandoned factory in a huge, like, unkempt field next to his house. He's in an industrial zone. Like, his parents work round the clock and are never home. It doesn't take a genius to put these clues together and come to the conclusion that Ishiro's family is probably near the poverty line.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because I think it's done well, because I don't think it's not necessarily like clues. It is approached in just very small lines that Ishiro's clearly not old enough to really care about or notice, but they're there. Like very early on, once we sort of met Ishiro and his friends, we get a very brief scene with his father and another guy, and they talk for just a few moments, a few beats, and they just chat about the work. It's tough, not having enough money. Essentially,
he wants to move to a better place.
The aspirations of moving somewhere better. Adult concerns is smoking. Am I sort of damaging my son's health with my smoking?
Yeah.
The scene very briefly when the police officers are investigating the disappearance of the 50 million yen, they do pop very briefly in to see Ishiro's mother as she's working. Yeah. And once they've been and gone, it lingers very slightly on the scene, and we see Ishiro and her colleagues sort of chat for a little bit longer. Yeah. And there's just an attempt to show us, they're off working, they're doing stuff, like, they're real as well.
It's interesting, though, in those scenes, because this gives us a glimpse of Ishiro Honda's career before Godzilla came along. Uh-huh. Because Ishiro Honda directed and longed to direct more of sort of dramas.
And
sort of slice-of-life dramas, and that's evident in his early kaiju films. Like you mentioned with Godzilla, the original, one of your favourite aspects of that was the slice-of-life elements, and we get that more in this.
Oh, no, certainly we do.
There's that scene you mentioned where Ichiro's mother briefly chats with her colleagues, and we linger on her for a little bit. Then that beautiful but tragic moment near the film's conclusion, where it's the day after, and Ichiro's fine, and he's all ready to go to school again. And he's a kid. It's the next day. He's forgotten it already.
Yeah, it's over. He doesn't
fine,
care.
Yeah. Whereas Ichiro's mother's saying, "Oh, I'm going to cut back work.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
I'm going to be here." And he's like, "Oh, but we'll lose out money. It's okay." And she's like, "Oh, but no,
I'll
be here."
And that sucks for her. Like, you get it.
And then when he leaves, she just breaks down in tears.
Uh-huh.
And the film leaves us that's the last we see of her, and it's so sad, but it's so beautiful, and like that's an example of one of the biggest merits of this film that does that sort of thing so well, and it's just so underappreciated. I would make no case that this is a masterpiece, and it is a very flawed film, but there are diamonds in the rough.
Yeah, no, totally. Because, yeah, there's some nice, just little subtle things. Like, even when he goes to Minami, the toy maker, for dinner, even then they have a conversation about money and whether or not, they can afford to have...
Sukiyaki beef.
Yeah, so money is present, and, throughout the film. And obviously, the sort of MacGuffin of the movie being the 50 million yen.
Yeah.
That, what I think no one gets. It's not like at the end of the movie they beat the robbers and the 50 million yen gets to go back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Chiro doesn't keep it.
Yeah, no, the police take it. That's gone. So that was very early on. That was sort of what came to mind. Just that there is a very firm established world, and that's actually one of the best so far in the Godzilla movies that I've gotten. Like, what Ishiro's days are like.
Yeah.
His relationship with the toy maker is actually really warming and really nice, and
I think it's incredibly sweet.
You
I really
get
like
the
it.
sense that they know each other. You understand what their relationship is that this is a neighbour that sort of keeps an eye on him and tries to encourage him as best he can.
Yeah, exactly. And looks out for him when his parents are. There's even that scene earlier where Ichiro's mother phones.
And gets him a bit. He gets him.
Yeah, exactly. Ichiro's mother phones the toy inventor and asks him, "Oh, will you kick in on Ichiro and make sure he's doing okay?" And he's, "Oh yeah, no problem." So he's obviously a trusted neighbour. And that's a really sweet thing. And like I keep saying, I really do think there's so much more going on in this film than people give it credit for. But...
And that's why, now that we go into the dream sequences and stuff, that's why I feel people's disappointment. Because the dream sequences are very long.
They are long, yeah.
As I say, this movie's 70 minutes? Could have been 50. Could have been 50. Easily could have been 50.
It's jarring as well because the Godzilla suits just chop and change.
They're different. Yeah, so we'll just... a few minutes, a little bit into the film, once we've learned about Ishiro and his life, he lays down on his living room floor after having gone home from, I assume, school.
And he's got his little homemade computer kit.
Yeah, and he dials in for Monster Island. He tries to reach them, and then the visual effects start, and we head into this I really do like the sequence, though, as much as I agree that the extended Monster Island sequences are really ridiculous. The actual dream sequences themselves that have the dream sequence layover effect, I think those are great.
Yeah.
And when the dream sequences get a bit visually interesting, I think that's when it's really good and I'm really into it.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so that weird flashing coloured border around the
sort of
picture,
orangey.
that orangey border comes up, and then Ishiro's on this plane, a commercial plane headed straight to Monster Island. And then the passengers slowly start to disappear. The picture inverts. He's running up and down the plane.
Yeah. There's no pilot.
Yeah, there's no pilot. I think that sequence is really, really interesting. And that unreality and that fantasy works a lot because it's very clear that it's a dream sequence. And it's very clear that what we're getting is this fantastic imagination of Ishiro and all his hopes and his dreams and what he wants to do is happening right before his eyes. He's able to make what he wants come true in his own head. But then once we jump into the previous footage, that same dreamness just sort of disappears and it becomes very literally we're on Monster Island. And I think I found myself going, wait, is this supposed to be a dream? Or are we just on Monster Island now and I've sort of missed something? So I did find that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly interpret every single monster scene in this is inside Ichiro's imagination.
Yeah, no, I certainly do as well. I just think that that could have maybe, had it been filmed as real footage, that could have been done so much better. Because I think that's the interesting thing. It would have been interesting to see this movie essentially scripted the same, but
with new footage.
Yeah.
What's interesting though, bringing up that point, what's interesting is that Honda chose to reshoot the scene where Godzilla teaches Minya how to use his atomic fire instead of reusing the sequence from Son of Godzilla, even though they're almost identical.
Yeah.
Honda reshot it.
And I guess that's because at the very least, that's your sort of emotional core of that sequence. You know,
Yeah.
that's, you know, the dream sequences are essentially about Minilla.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess you want to reshoot that so you're not literally having like the emotional part of your movie be the part of another movie that came out a few years earlier.
Actually, yeah, good point. There is no stock footage of Minilla.
Yeah, all the Minilla stuff is at least done.
And that's the thing. Minilla is the monster star of this film.
Yeah, no, certainly, and I think that's fine. I do.
If it's aimed at children.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Minilla is really cute. Or at least I did in the previous films. I definitely don't think Minilla is as cute in this movie in as many ways.
Because he talks.
Because, yes and no. And I think, yes, because the voice is strange. And at times it sounds like it's coming out like a little speaker in like Manilla's throat. Like there's like a crackle, like a bit like a tinny speaker quality sound to it. As though there's a little voice box at the back of his throat. Yeah, so I do find it strange. But at the same time, no, I think it's cute that Manilla's chatting to Ishiro. And I think, for me, the important thing to understand that clicked is essentially what the movie the point the movie makes at the end, is that the reason Ishiro loves Minilla so much is that he sees himself in Minilla. That,
exactly.
Minilla
scrappy underdog.
As a scrappy little underdog and a little wimpy kid that can't do anything and runs away and is afraid of things. And that by helping Minilla sort of face his fears and use his ice blast or nuclear fire or what
You
is
always
it?
think it's ice, don't you?
It's blue.
It's atomic fire.
Atomic fire. Atomic's green, Steven.
It looks like Minya's vaping when he blows his smoke rings.
Little Minya.
We get it, Minya, you vape.
It's not cool. By helping Minilla use atomic fire and things like that, atomic blast, that, you know, he's gaining his own strength and gaining his own confidence. So that is the takeaway from the Minilla stuff. It's true. But it's so long. There's so much of it.
There is. Coming back to something you said earlier. You said that you thought it made sense at this point in the series to sort of do a calm down film after the all out bombardment of Destroy All Monsters. I think it's interesting that they took a radically different approach, because the way I see it is that Toho didn't exactly write themselves into a corner with Destroy All Monsters, but by doing the decades ahead jump forward to 1999.
Yeah, you kind of need to like break that down first before you like continue on.
Like it was clearly nothing was meant to be followed on from that. Mm-hmm. That was clearly a conclusion, and I think they must have just found themselves going, how do we follow on from this? That how can we follow on from this in a way that general audiences will understand? And I think it's so interesting that they took this approach, that this film takes place in the real world with a kid who is a Kaiju fan.
Yeah, well, it sort of takes like a meta approach to like deconstruct it, and then doing that lets you then go, okay, well, we'll start doing them conventionally and normal again after that. Yeah, like I agree with you there that you sort of need to do something like this to be able to go back and continue doing conventional Godzilla movies where Godzilla invades and people need to defend them and stuff. Essentially, in a lot of ways, to reset the canon. Yeah. You know, it's also, I do appreciate the Monster Island returns as a concept. Yeah. Albeit very different, I think. It's not as much a militarized, like, human-based presence. It is literally more like an island where monsters live.
Yeah, that's sort of
what their own free volition.
I mean, you see more of Monsterland/Monster Island, but that is sort of more what it becomes.
Just like a natural place where they...
Because it started off as Monsterland, it's now become Monster Island.
Yes.
And, I mean, there is I dread to use this term, but there is a fan theory that Monsterland and Monster Island are two different locations. Monsterland is Monsterland, and Monster Island is actually the island from Son of Godzilla.
Right.
That has since become inhabited by many giant monsters.
That makes sense.
But, I mean, there's little to no evidence for that, and, I mean, why?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think that's kind of cool.
I mean, if you want to think that, why not? But I mean,
Stephen gives a thumbs down to that theory.
No, I just mean it's.
We should have a section every week where you just fart on beloved fan theories.
The thing that's annoying me about the fandom this week.
Yeah, exactly. We just shit on everyone's fun. Has Stephen ruined your day? Please email us.
I did once get a message on Tumblr calling me a jackass and saying that I don't get enough hate that I should. I don't get nearly as much hate as I should.
Was this for the podcast, or was this for just your broke tumbling?
It was just for me in general. It was just me being a general arsehole.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I can't deny it. Show me the message, I'll probably agree. If you want me to take over Kaijusaurus, please let me know.
But going back to what you said about the film's sort of meta approach, it's. I mean, I've read a lot about this film, and I've seen it be compared to everything from Where the Wild Things Are to Terry Gilliam's Brazil.
Totally. Like, I think it's in that vein. But we very briefly touched on a thing that we felt, we chatted just amongst ourselves while the film was on, that a film that maybe it doesn't owe directly to All Monsters Attack, but there are some parallels.
Context first before you name the film. Ichiro has broken loose from the robbers. He is engaging them in the abandoned warehouse building.
He's ducking them.
He is a little scrappy kid fending off two robbers.
Foolish robbers.
Two foolish, clumsy robbers in with
a high tolerance for physical pain.
A high tolerance for physical pain in an environment where it's just the three of them. And he sets booby traps, and they're clumsy and they fall over themselves, and
they get hurt, but not that bad.
John Hughes ripped off Godzilla's Revenge for Home Alone and Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, and Home Alone 3 and Home Alone 4
and Home Alone 5.
The Holiday Heist.
But yeah, no, that's the vibe.
That was striking though, wasn't it?
It was striking.
In all seriousness. Like, yeah, you see the bit where I think he starts chucking cans of paint at them or something. Mm-hmm. So this is Home Alone 2 Lost in New York.
Totally. What were we saying?
Home Alone 5. It's Home Alone 6, Ichiro's Revenge.
Have you seen Home Alones? I've seen Home Alone 1, 2, and 4.
I've seen Home Alone 1, 2. I saw Home Alone 3 once, way back in the start of high school when they showed us it when there was a teacher off. So I don't really consider myself to have seen that film. I've seen Home Alone 1 and 2.
Listeners, have you seen Home Alone 5? Please, anyone that's seen Home Alone 5...
It was a TV movie and Malcolm McDowell is in it.
Oh, soon. If you've seen it, please let us know what you thought of it, and I will read it out at the end of whatever episode you email in for.
Going from the DVD artwork, the kid in it, excuse my French, is fuck ugly.
Okay, moving on.
Moving back to
that parallel.
So the Home Alone parallel is very apt, I think, because it was just I watched Home Alone 2 again at Christmas there, and when I'm watching this again, I thought, shit, this is strikingly like Home Alone.
But the comparison you mentioned to, particularly Where the Wild Things Are, actually hits me quite hard, because that's almost in many ways very similar in terms of plot.
Yeah, this kid escapes to an island full of weird creatures.
Mm-hmm. And while this has a bit more of an actual direct plot with the robbers and that, it's not far off, and just nothing really changes for Ishiro. Nothing's really solved.
Well, that's interesting, because you say that. That is the exact argument I've read when comparing this film to Brazil. Have you seen Brazil?
I've not actually seen Brazil. I've not seen Brazil. But you can sort of talk generally about it.
I'll be giving away the ending.
No, I want to see Brazil.
No, you want to see Brazil.
I want to see Brazil. And I'm sure there are people that are listening to this that want to see Brazil as well.
That's true, yeah. I mean, if you've not seen Brazil by this point... Come on.
But
I won't give away Brazil. But the comparisons are interesting. And once Ross has seen Brazil, we'll record a little addendum to this episode.
Post-Brazil discussion.
Basically, it has... Without giving too much away, it has to do with...
Spoilers.
Delusions of the main character, delusions of safety within a grander backdrop of problems and danger.
That's cool. That's big enough for me.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. But I do get where you're going with that. I do think it's interesting.
I mean, I'm not going to write a 10,000 word thesis on the comparisons between Godzilla's Revenge.
It's coming out tomorrow.
1969, director Ishiro Honda, and Brazil, 1984. 1995. Director Terry Gilliam, but
you might.
I would like to.
But yeah, no, that is a good thing to talk about. Is that just sort of generally the ending? Is that yes, Ishiro thwarts the robbers with the accidental help of the toy maker, who, because he discovers the car, or at least discovers the scene enough to call the police. He doesn't rescue or save Ishiro in any way.
But he comes across the money in a burlap sack.
Yeah, in a burlap sack.
And phones the police.
Phones the police so that once Ishiro has managed to best the robbers, he is able
He's
to...
got backup.
He's got backup. But well, very briefly talking about the robbers. The robbers were pretty fun.
I like them, yeah.
We don't learn a lot about them, but there's a classic just contrast that we get a lot in these movies of the one in the suit, clearly the ringleader.
Yeah.
Higher ambitions, a bit more of a understanding, like, thinks very high of himself.
More of the higher criminal, yeah.
Yeah, and then his skeezy little buddy.
It's funny though, because
jacket.
when Ross and I were watching this, and when we're joined for the second half of the film by Laura, who you might remember from previous podcast episodes, we're joking that saying how did these two ever manage to pull off a 50 million yen heist?
Yeah.
And then Ross joked that clearly there was a third man
that was shot during the escape.
Yeah, the third man was clearly the very, very competent one. He was
organised it completely.
Yeah, he was the Harry Lime, the Orson Welles. He was the one that completely organised it, and he went down in the heist. And now it's been left to this numbskull in the suit and the glasses who has to suddenly become the leader.
Yeah, no,
and
certainly.
they're just hopeless now without the third guy. I really like that idea.
Makes sense. They're just sort of
really
like,
funny.
They are doing a semi-competent job of escaping, given how inept they are. One of them wears sunglasses indoors
constantly,
at night in a rubble-filled building.
If you ever came to G-Fest with me, I think it would be hilarious for us to dress as them.
Oh, that'd be fun. That's a good combo. There's a few other Godzilla combos that we talked about dressing as. Wasn't it two of the pilots or... two of the maintenance guys from, like, I think the second film or something we joked about going
as. The pilots from Godzilla Raids Again. Yeah. But I'll be at GFS this year dressed as Dr. Sarazawa. I mentioned that last time, but it's cool.
Classic costume.
Classic costume,
but yeah, no, so going back to this idea that of the ending is that Ishiro does gain some confidence.
And he finally confronts his bully.
Oh, that's right, yeah, we need to talk about that.
This ending is so... There's a lot going on in this ending.
I cracked up a lot at one specific bit.
This ending just is not lit up.
Yeah, like...
Okay, so, Ichiro, after we mentioned earlier, his mother, he has a little talk with his mother. He goes down, he's mobbed by reporters saying, how do you feel?
Which I think is a fun little bit.
That's fun, yeah. Then he heads off with his pal, wee girl, and they walk into school, and then they're confronted by Ichiro's bully and his little punk gang. Mm-hmm. And he's like, Ichiro says, I'm not scared of you anymore, and proceeds to...
Well, this is sort of immediately before the bully sort of offers something of a hand of friendship, or doesn't he say something like, you want to hang out, or like, do you want to do this with us? Like... I remember it not being like immediately threatening.
Yeah, something like that.
It's something because Ashiro's obviously just foiled a bank robbery.
Yeah.
Or like foiled two escaping criminals. So I imagine there's some sort of respect there in his burgeoning group of friends. But I recall that they don't immediately like step out and start threatening him.
Yeah,
like
that's right.
They sort of just say something very neutral, like, "Hey, like, do you want to hang out?" It's something like that.
Yeah.
But
Ichiro charges him, and proceeds to get in a fist fight and overcomes Gabara.
And we get flashes of the fight with Minilla.
Yeah. That's earlier with the robber, which is the great sequence. I really like that sequence. That sequence is great when the robber's coming at Ichiro with a knife, and it intercuts and flashes with Gabara and the robber. Monster Gabara and the robber. That's Gabara's roar.
Yes.
And Ichiro picks up a fire extinguisher, and Ichiro firing the fire extinguisher at the robber is intercut with Minilla firing his atomic breath at Gabara. That's really good. I really like that. But yeah, so Ichiro in the end overcomes his bully Gabara and becomes the leader of the gang of bullies.
Yay!
And then wins their approval further by, just as he's redeemed himself, by going and being a little fucking prick.
Yeah, man.
And like honestly being a little shithead. And like every ounce of sympathy I feel for Ichiro is gone by this point. He goes over, there's a guy painting a billboard and with a bike with a horn on the ground. Ichiro honks the horn, going. The guy gets startled, falls off his ladder, lands on his back on fucking solid concrete.
Yeah.
And then his paint pot spills all over his face and clothes, and he's like, "Oh, what'd you do? What'd you do this for, pal?" and
The kids all run away chanting and cheering.
all the kids run away and cheer. Yeah, baby, you did it! Yay! And then Ichiro just runs, meets his dad, who's driving a train at this point. "Oh, Dad, you need to apologise for me." "Oh, what for, my son?" "I did that." And the guy and the painter's running after him, going, "What are you? What you doing? What you doing? You wee fucker!"
And the movie ends there, doesn't it?
And the movie just ends with like Ichiro's dad like profusely apologising to and one line that struck me is Ichiro's dad says to the painter, "Oh, I'll pay to have it cleaned." And it's like, Ichiro, you were just talking to your mum about having less money, you little shithead.
Yeah.
It's like, you're just costing more money now.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, that is like such a bizarre little ending, and I think it's funny. It's certainly I certainly laughed at it. Just how abrupt it is.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
It is, but yeah, no, it sort of mucks the point we were making.
But yeah, Ichiro,
about, like, Ichiro's growth as a character.
Ichiro overcomes his bullies by becoming the bigger bully.
Yeah.
Is he just going to go and beat some kid up in the playground?
Yeah, exactly. No, because I think there's clearly like an element of like, ooh, playful childhood, mucking about with the adults. And
no, that guy's day is ruined.
Yeah,
he's
like,
probably,
he might be injured.
He's probably
Can he work?
swallowed some pain.
Is he gonna have to take a day off work?
He's going to hospital probably. Like, he's inhaled paint. Get his stomach pumped.
Yeah, like paint in the 60s.
Because this little shit who thinks Minilla is the tightest shit ever fucking lobbed some paint over him.
Manilla's not that cool.
Any kid who thinks Minilla is the tightest shit ever, I mean,
can't be that cool.
Can't be. I'm saying,
Come on, Ichiro.
Ichiro's getting bullied for a reason.
Wow.
Wow, that's a joke.
That was too much. No. But yeah, the movie ends there, and so ends All Monsters Attack. A film I like a lot. That ending. I like that ending. I think it's funny, and I can at least watch it through that prism of ha ha ha. The kids will play, but to actually read into it a bit more is to go, oh wow, that's. Well,
I mean, maybe I'm being the very thing I was criticising earlier. Excuse me. This film was not meant for me. Kids will find that hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, you're not. Yeah,
kids will find that hilarious
because it is. I thought it was hilarious.
We found it hilarious,
but we're also adults in a
so
kind of
subversive way.
Poor dude.
We found it funny very subversively.
Yeah,
whereas kids would just find it funny
because
like
it's funny. The guy fell over.
Yeah, this adult's day is
cool.
fucking ruined.
That's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're like, that would suck.
Look,
if that
he's a fucking
me.
fanny.
I would be so annoyed.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be suing Ishiro's parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, like I said, this film is not meant for my age group, our age group. And kids will find that hilarious, and I have no doubt kids back in Japan in 1969 did find that hilarious.
Yeah, no, totally.
To wrap up our discussion on this?
Yeah, no, so I just, I'm whipping through my notes. I just had a few.
One thing we forgot to mention is the glorious stock footage return of the giant condor.
Absolutely, welcome back.
It's so funny because that montage you mentioned earlier where Ichiro first fantasizes that he's on Monster Island, he's up a tree and he's seeing all the monsters and he goes, oh look, there's Manda, there's Gorosaurus, there's Anguirus, and he goes, oh, giant condor!
And you're like, yes, and the giant condor's here.
Then it plays out the entire fight from Eber Horror of the Deep.
Which was not an exciting fight.
Verbatim.
Just the eagle.
The entire 25-30 seconds of it.
The condor swoops down, gets bashed. That's really about it.
Yeah, it's kind of bashes around Godzilla. Like,
ow! Steven just slapped me. But yeah, no, I remember.
Was most welcome.
When does the giant condor come in? Is that Eber Horror of the Deep?
Eber Horror of the Deep, yeah.
Well, when we were watching that movie, I remember you telling me that I would see the giant condor again.
Yeah,
I've seen him again.
Yeah, I mean, you won't see him again.
That's it. This was the last.
This is it. Yeah, this is an open request to Gareth Edwards, Hideaki Anno, and Shinji Higuchi, the men whose hands Godzilla's future is in.
Bring back
Gareth Edwards in Godzilla 2 or Godzilla vs Kong
or Rogue Squadron
or Rogue One.
Oh, Rogue One,
which looks good, by the way.
Yeah, it does.
The trailer came out today. Looks pretty tight.
It does.
Gareth Edwards, Hideaki Anno, Shinji Higuchi. Bring back Giant Condor in any of your Godzilla films. That would be cool.
All, preferably.
All hail the Giant Condor.
Blessed be.
But wrapping up our discussion of this, if you're happy to.
Well, I just had one very brief thing to say, which was literally just the second dream sequence. the second dream sequence with Ishiro running in slow motion through the woods with some really great
with
music.
Gabara cackling.
With Gabara's cackling and his sort of like imposed head in the corner, like chasing him. That was a great sequence, and that's an example of what I mean by the parts in the Monster Island bits where it's very visceral, where you're feeling what Ishiro's feeling, and he's running around, and it's emotional and exciting. And visually matches that. Really fantastic and really, really great.
No,
but once it does just lapse into very static stock footage where to slot it into the film you kind of just have to have Ishiro standing and reacting to what's going on. That's where it becomes just far less interesting.
No, I agree, but that scene you mentioned with the slow motion Ichiro being sort of taunted by an omnipresent Gabara is really great because obviously it's not scary, but it is a sort of nightmarish image. Like, and imagine it would be not scary for kids, but
thrilling.
Yeah, like we've all had a dream where we're running for something we can't escape from. And I don't know, it's visually it's very cool as well. Minilla the God.
Minilla the God, yeah. Well, very briefly, the two other things that I think are worth talking about is let's try and unpack that weird line where the toy maker says, well, some adults talk about gods.
Yeah, there's a god in the adult world, and there's a god. Yeah, so this is at the end when Ishiro is being mobbed by reporters, and he just gives
and they don't really understand his...
He gives a very blasé answer, like, oh, I wasn't alone, I had help from Minilla. He runs off. That's all I need to say now, bye. And the reporters say, Minilla? What's Minilla? And the kindly toy inventor says, oh, Minilla is a monster. Children had their own god. In the adult world there is a god, and in the children's world there is a god. Minilla the god. What the hell does that mean?
Does it mean...
Minilla is a deity?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, does it mean literally that potentially Minilla was a weird deity visiting Ichiro in his dreams, imparting him this wisdom? Does it mean that
Ichiro grows into a cult leader?
Yeah, or does it... Yeah, that'd be interesting. Does it mean that even in 1969 that there was an understanding that the youth of today, their only god is their...
It's a critique of fandom.
Yes, is their media, their television, their movies. That's all children care about. That's
Ishiro,
the only prism.
Banksy, Honda.
Yes. It's a weird little line. It's an interesting line. I don't actually think there's...
It's just a fun little line.
There's
like,
much
kids
to
really like
it.
Minya.
But it's an interesting line to unpack.
But I feel, to wrap up our discussion, I want to... Because, we have rattled along with this film, but I still defend this film... I defend this film with my dying breath. And it's a very flawed film. Much like Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice.
Topical.
It's a very flawed film, but holy shit, everyone, it's nowhere near as bad as you're saying it is.
That's for another podcast. But you should totally write something up about that, or you can...
Yeah, I might, but I'm just going to wrap this up with a quote by... Toho historian Guy Tucker, who is unfortunately no longer with us. Guy Tucker once wrote, "Some movies are so psychologically perfect that one doubts their creators ever knew how deep they were going. All Monsters Attack is one." And that perfectly surmises my thoughts on the film. I think there's so much more going on in this film than audiences and critics alike generally
give it its due for. Give it its credit. Yeah, no, I enjoy it a lot. I think that I'm always attracted to the social aspects of Godzilla films. It's a lot for just sort of depicting average and modern for the time life in Japan. I think that's really interesting. And yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons I like a lot of this film. But no, I like the sort of whimsical child narrator or child point of view part of this film, and I think Ishiro is lovely. I like that kid a lot. I think he does great. I think he's a great little actor. Yeah. And I think this is a fun little film. It's so short that the shorter a film is, the less I find it. The shorter a film is, it's honestly the harder I find to be able to criticize it. Yeah. In certain ways, in terms of just if it's a very short film, I can just shrug my shoulders and say, well, it's short. It did something new.
It doesn't commit the sin of overstating its welcome.
Exactly. That's it. It doesn't overstay its welcome. You can give it that.
Yeah.
70 minutes in and out.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so if a film doesn't overstay its welcome, if a film leaves quicker than it needs to, then I can sort of always just give it the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. No, exactly. Well, that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
Although at this point, before we move on to our listener submissions, we're going to... before we move on to our listener submissions, as we usually do, I mentioned earlier that for about the second half of the film, we're joined by my girlfriend Laura, who has been on the podcast previously on the Mothra 1961 podcast and on the Ultraman X series and review podcast, which she and I did together. And so Laura's here with us now, and Laura is going to share some thoughts on Godzilla's Revenge, aren't you?
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
So, you've seen this... You have kind of seen this film...
I've never seen it properly.
I've
never sat down and watched it.
Yeah, you've
completely.
never sat down and watched it from start to finish, have you? But, I mean, I mentioned this film a lot in my final year university dissertation, and I think I was watching it a lot around then, and you were present for a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
So you've seen this film sort of bits and pieces a lot around the place.
Yeah, I really like this film though.
Go on.
I think it's incredibly sweet. I think it's sweet. I think it's lovely. I am just all round pleased by this film.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, we talked about that, just it being sweet.
We spoke a lot about how sad it is.
It's really, well, I wrote this down. It's really sad, and it's like, you know, Ishiro, he's really brilliant as like this little young boy, and like who has never not felt lonely, and that's clearly what he's having. Like he feels lonely. His parents are not there.
And he doesn't even realise it necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's just it. Like he's quite content playing in this derelict building with the like earphones.
And that's what's sad.
He's
yeah.
it's sad, but he's genuinely happy with that. Who's never had that where you played imagination games by yourself and were
fine.
content?
Yeah, you didn't realise how sad your own situation was.
Yeah.
That's a very apt point for this film.
Not that doing that is inherently the sign that you're lonely as well, but that sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's telling that that's what he does.
All the time.
That said, and with children, when some children play imagination games, that's the kind of sign of, oh, they're a bit weird, let's not kind of speak to them, or oh
we were
God.
all those kids.
Yeah.
We were like that. That was our
shtick. we were all the sad lonely
Yeah,
ones.
that's how these kids are usually portrayed in
yeah,
exactly.
TV and that sort
And
of
it
thing,
was really nice to actually see like a child be a child, because I feel like we see all too often children being almost more like adults and expected to deal with a lot more than they're actually capable of.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because Ross and I later spoke about how like Ichiro is very aware of sort of the value of money. Like he asks a lot about like, aren't you going to lose money for this, or are you going to be poor because you've bought this beef? But
at the same time, also doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't really, but it's interesting you say that, because like it's refreshing, because Ichiro is a child character who is in no rush to grow up.
Well, I know with the Crappy Robbers we're able to compare this to Home Alone, but even just look at Kevin McAllister in Home Alone. Like, he is fully aware his parents are rich. They're going to Paris for Christmas.
Yeah.
And when he's alone, the first thing he does is do all the sort of grown-up stuff. He's shaving and like he kind of hosts his own party essentially, and like he has a very much grown-up way to dealing with almost a very similar situation.
Yeah.
Like in literal child against two stupid adults.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a very, very different thing, and it might just be more westernized. It might be the fact that, you know, Home Alone came out nearly 30 years after.
No, but I think you're onto something there. Like, I think that's a good point. That, like, yeah, we did compare it to Home Alone, like, a bit, but, like, Ishiro and Kevin McAllister have, like, completely different lifestyles and, like, family situations.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. And Kevin McAllister is absolutely a rich wee shithead.
He's a privileged piece of crap. Yeah. Your favourite's problematic, Kevin McAllister. But it's interesting because, like,
Stealing toothbrushes.
Ichiro takes on these two robbers out of a sense of like having to, cause out of a sense of desperation. Whereas Kevin McAllister seems to take on the wet bandits out of a sense of it does have to, but there's a sense of demented glee there as well. Like he's enjoying doing this, whereas Ichiro is just doing it out of a sense of pure survival.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, definitely, actually.
Bloody Macaulay Culkin.
I saw him live once.
So
You did?
weird.
Yeah,
in Chicago.
I was in Minneapolis in the USA for a gig
once.
Not Minneapolis, England. No.
Not Minneapolis, England.
That's a long street.
And it was Harmar Superstar, and then Macaulay Culkin's band Pizza Underground showed up, and it was great. We don't need to put this in the podcast, by the way, but
No, I'm happy to keep this in.
Yeah.
Laura, do you have anything else to say on the subject of Godzilla's Revenge?
I really love how the relationship between, I can never say it, is it Minilla?
Minilla, yeah, Minilla or Minya.
Minya sounds better.
Yeah.
The relationship between Minya and Ishiro is really nice because they have like this shared feeling of inadequacy to like bullies or like dominant figures. I mean, I suppose with Ishiro it's the lead bully that he fucking tanks, by the way.
He mauls that kid.
Like I don't think you see Minya just kind of attack a painter.
Yeah,
for no reason.
Oh yeah, we spoke about that at length.
I know, I could hear you. But yeah, I think that's really lovely, like that whole sort of comparison between this monster, and it might just be a kind of ploy to try and make it more of a Godzilla movie, but I think it works, and I think it's really sweet.
Well, yeah.
Who hasn't looked up to some sort of hero of theirs and pretended that they were in the same
hanging out.
situation?
Yeah, exactly.
Or just even hanging out, do you know?
Because there is an element of that. He just sort of
Yeah.
hangs out with. Yes, they
Yeah,
fight monsters for a bit, but at some point they're just kind of hanging out with.
Yeah, they
Talk
just
about their feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
talk about our feelings.
It's interesting because it's interesting to bring that up because another reading in this film, which is quite a common reading, is it's a film about the relationships between fathers and sons. Ichiro is never really framed in the same shot as his father.
Yeah.
They're always talking at something of a distance. Ichiro's always talking to his dad when he's in his train car. And
running away from him after
a
having
distance. Yeah, exactly. And his father's having to apologise for
Yeah,
something
and that's
shitty his son's
true.
done. Whereas Minilla and his father Godzilla is a fucking shitty parent. And he treats Minya like shit. He tells him to bugger off and fight his own fights. And he does step in and absolutely trash Gabara.
Uh-huh. And they hug at one point.
They do hug at one point. Like
But
Godzilla
it's
always
still
starts,
Godzilla. That's
Godzilla
not
starts
fair.
off as a shitty parent and then softens up somewhat. But yeah, that's interesting. Fathers and sons.
Yeah, no, certainly.
Anything else to say before we move on to listener submissions?
Creepy babysitting guy. He was really nice, but pretty creepy.
What, the toy maker?
You cannot not deny he was creepy.
I mean, yeah, I get it.
He was
But
a tiny bit creepy.
No, I mean, I get what you're
Thing.
saying. Like,
He
I literally
just
just like.
is.
He's like a weird dude. He's like
yeah,
a weird kinda,
dude. He's
got
a
like
bit
a gross
creepy.
beard and he's a
you
toy
know.
maker.
Yeah.
And he hangs out like a bar at one point,
Yeah,
just like chats to the police
Yeah,
officers.
the bar that seems
I
to just
mean-
be like next to the apartment building.
And
Yeah,
like not
it's-
only that, like checks on Ishiro, and I kind of look down from this point, but like I mean, he doesn't seem to do anything but go to this bar.
Just hangs out.
He is a tad creepy,
Yeah, he's
yeah.
strange. Well, it makes
I mean,
sense.
what's
Like
that
He's
hat?
eccentric.
He's like the
What
Doc
is that
Brown
hat?
to
Yeah,
Ishiro's
exactly.
little
Exactly.
firefly.
Yeah,
Like he's the kind of person that Ishiro's friends with, and that Ishiro finds.
Interesting.
Yeah, that Ishiro finds interesting is that he can extend a friend, like find friendship with people like that much more easily than
Yeah.
kids his own
Children,
age.
yeah.
Like he finds the 50-year-old like toy maker.
Yeah.
Way
Yeah,
more
like
interesting.
much more of a contemporary and someone that actually understands him than children his own age. But
Right.
yeah, no, that good point.
Shall we move on to
I
listener
will
submissions?
just sit here.
Yeah,
That's fine.
perfect.
Goodbye.
Right, listener submissions.
Let's see what we got.
We didn't really put out any call for submissions this time. We just let you
Do it if you knew.
chuck them at us if you want, and we got 2, which is fine because this is already going to be the longest fucking one I've ever done.
Yeah.
Sorry for the amount of swearing, by the way.
Dreadful, Stephen.
sorry.
Absolutely dreadful.
Explicit on iTunes. So our first submission comes from Jonathan Brito, or Brito.
We'll go with Brito.
Brito.
Correct us if we're
Burrito.
wrong.
Hi
Brito.
there.
Sorry, Jonathan.
Jonathan Brito. Hi there, this is Jonathan, who is also on Tumblr as Go See a Movie. Jonathan says, All Monsters Attack, or Godzilla's Revenge, may as well be one of the lower points in the Godzilla series, but I think its mediocrity is often over-exaggerated by fans. It certainly has great flaws in its abundance of stock footage and its overall distracting weirdness of having Minilla grow sizes. and
Oh yeah,
speak-
that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
the
Massive crotch
the
shot.
extreme zoom, the extreme close-up of Manilla's crotch.
Yeah, well that as well, but also the fact that like I think you pointed this out, Laura, when we were watching it, is that like in the same scenes, so like Ishiro sees Godzilla and Godzilla's huge, and then Ishiro meets Minilla and they're the same size,
Uh-huh.
and then Minilla hugs Godzilla, and Manilla's just a few inches shorter than Godzilla.
There is
Or like a. It's a dream.
If you paid some goddamn attention to the film, there is audio to signify when Minilla is changing sizes.
Oh, is there? Right.
And that plays off screen whenever he's gonna bugger
That's
off.
fine. That means that someone just noticed that when they were editing it. Like, oh no.
Jonathan says, however, there is still a heart and soul to this film that should connect deeply with fans, and that is conveyed through the character of Ichiro, who I strongly believe is one of the best human characters in the entire series.
I could easily
Best
say that.
fictional character ever.
Every Godzilla fan, in one way or another, can identify in Ichiro because he represents us at both our lowest, such as feeling lonely, underappreciated, or lost in this big confusing world, and at our highest, when we can put aside that negativity and for a moment find comfort in the films of Godzilla. Very succinctly put, Jonathan, and I think
he put that so well.
I speak for almost everyone listening to this when I say, like, I've certainly felt like that at more than one point in my life, and certainly at Ichiro's age, so I couldn't agree more. All Monsters Attack may not be the finest Godzilla film, but it is indeed the most personal in regards to fans of the series. It reflects us by demonstrating the power the series has inspired deeply within us, teaching us the confidence and bravery needed to tackle this tough world. Fans give this movie a harder time than it deserves. We shouldn't feel ashamed for this movie. As fans, we can come together and certainly poke fun at its sillier aspects, especially the cartoonish voice of Minilla in the English dub. I'll show you a bit of that if you want, Ross.
Oh, please
And Laura.
do.
But I still think we should admire and applaud its message. The message of overcome your bullies by becoming the king bully.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is not a film about Godzilla. This is a film about us and our relationship to the Godzilla series.
Yeah.
Interesting reading, and
Really,
I agree with a lot of those points.
It was super
submissions.
nice.
Yeah. Our second submission comes from Alex Mekagojira3K on Tumblr, one of my good friends.
Hello.
Hi! Who wants to take this one?
I'll take it.
Cool.
Godzilla's Revenge, says Alex, is a weird film. It was one of the last few Showa films I saw, and the excessive stock footage really diminished my enjoyment. I didn't really like the story, preferring a more straightforward kaiju epic. Thankfully, things change. I kind of love Godzilla's Revenge nowadays. I think the film is a really interesting take on the franchise that's more about us than it is Godzilla. It reminds me very much of the film adaptation of Where the Wild Things Are, so yeah, that is a good comparison. These are childhood issues that are dealt with through a world of monsters. I think the only weak point here is the stock footage. Minya has always been a strange misstep in the franchise history, but his goofy, cartoonish nature suits this movie perfectly. It's also worth noting that the Ultraman composer Kunio Miyachi, who really plays up the kid-friendly and bizarre elements in equal doses. In the larger scheme, there are plenty of films I enjoy more than this one, but I think far too many people write this off completely.
Agreed.
Yes.
Alex says, side note, they grew up with the Godzilla Revenge title, but as I've grown older, I almost prefer the All Monsters Attack title, if only because it suits the contents of the films a bit more, even if the attacking is only within dreams.
Side note, is Gabara a denizen of the Black Lodge? He clearly feeds on pain and suffering.
Twin Peaks. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there is a Twin Peaks vibe to some of these dream sequences, like
Oh,
Ichiro in the plane.
Oh yeah,
That's
totally.
like Ichiro.
That is Lynchian.
That's Ichiro in the Red Room.
That is totally
sipping
Lynchian.
coffee with Dale Cooper.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's interesting because this film, on its US release, was initially titled Godzilla's Revenge, and in the years to come, Toho chose the international English title All Monsters Attack, none of which really represent the film.
Oh.
Which,
No.
No, not really.
so yeah, I mean, thanks Alex, and thank you Jonathan for those submissions.
Your submissions.
Both very
And
good.
thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
And thank you, Laura, for
Thank you.
submitting verbally.
Wow.
Yeah, you just got real rude there.
We did. Forgetting our fans.
Let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
This has been a roller coaster ride of an episode.
It really has.
It's been very blasé.
We got sad, we got angry, we expressed
We
a
got
lot of
loud.
emotions, we got loud, we got very
Yes,
loud.
I
Have fun
could
editing this,
hear
Steven.
So,
But
as always, you can find us on SoundCloud, where this podcast is hosted.
That's disgusting.
SoundCloud.com/Kaijusaurus. Kaijusaurus.tumblr.com is the blog
Hub.
from which this podcast is spun off.
The Kaijusaurus media empire
will
grows
find-
daily, thanks to you, our dear listeners.
Rage against the
You
machine.
will find the show notes posted on the Tumblr blog. We're also on Facebook, the Kaijusaurus Podcast, and we, all three of us, have Twitter. You'll find show note links to those.
If you haven't already liked us on Facebook, you should do that.
Yeah, please do, because the Facebook page is stagnating at 97 likes, and just get us to 100,
You
please.
could be number 100.
You could be number 100, and if you do, you'll be a special prize. Can't say
could-
what it is, but it's a mini Mars bar, maybe.
I mean, I don't want to commit to
An
that.
iron blue bar.
You've committed to that. I haven't committed to that.
But
Stephen will do the prize.
I will send you a smiley face.
the prize is the gift of our acknowledgement.
Perfect.
There we go. Up next for you, Ross.
Uh-huh.
So
Ross
we've left...
faces his biggest challenge.
Next on the Kaijusaurus Podcast, Ross faces the bigger challenge than ever. Anyway, we have... This is the last film of the 1960s.
Right.
So we're leaving the 60s behind.
Are we beginning on the 70s?
We're skipping 1970.
Right.
And we're going to 1971.
Okay. Good year.
The first film of 1971, first film of the 1970s, is Gojira Tai Hedorah. Godzilla versus Hedorah,
Ooh.
or Godzilla versus the Smog Monster.
Wow. That's cool.
And,
that's very 70s.
Talk about tonal whiplash.
Are we going?
That's all I'm going to say, because buckle up.
I'm buckled.
Buckle up for
A rip
Godzilla versus Hedorah.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly excited.
So as always, everyone, thank you for listening to this. This has been the Kaijusaurus Podcast, Godzilla's Revenge / All Monsters Attack.
Have a good one, folks.
And all I'm going to do is, I'm really sorry for this episode.
Why are we a bit manic?
This has probably
mad?
been a real chore to listen to.
No, I think it was a good one.
I will let you know in about a week.
Yeah, let us know.
I mean today.
Also, I mean, Star Wars Rogue One looks pretty good.
Yeah, it does. That just came out today.
Trailer came out today.
So you can now date when this
No,
podcast
no,
was
no,
recorded.
no.
My
It
boy
came
Gareth.
out last week.
Last
No,
week.
It came out today, Laura.
Oh,
Two
okay,
weeks
okay. I was
ago.
trying to save your skin, but
My boy Gareth. Looks good.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway,
End
Bye,
this.
everyone.
End our lives.
fucking
Bye.
end this bullshit.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thanks.
Be
Bye.
safe. Drive home safe.
Bye.